Let me share an eerie experience that a friend of mine had recently. It's one of those stories that makes you question what's really out there, especially when you're alone at night. For the purpose of the video, we will call her Sarah. Sarah had just moved into a quaint little apartment in a quiet neighborhood. The place was charming, with high ceilings and large windows that let in plenty of light during the day. She loved it. However, like most places, it had its quirks. For starters, her apartment was on the second floor and there was a massive tree right outside her bedroom window. One evening, after a long day at work, she was lounging on her couch, scrolling through her phone. The sun was setting, filling her living room with a warm, golden light. Everything felt peaceful until it started to get dark. That's when she noticed a flickering light from her window. Curious, she peered out and saw that the streetlights had just turned on. The tree outside cast strange shadows, and she could make out the silhouette of a man standing under the streetlight, staring directly at her window. Although it felt odd, she brushed it off as just someone waiting for a ride, or something similar. That night, as she settled into bed, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She pulled the curtains shut, trying to calm herself, but as she lay there drifting off, she heard a soft tapping sound against the window, which jolted her awake. Hesitating, she finally mustered the courage to peek through the curtains. There was nothing outside, just darkness and the rustling of leaves. She told herself it was just the wind and tried to get back to sleep, but the tapping persisted, growing louder and more insistent. After a few minutes, she decided enough was enough. Throwing the curtains open, she half expected to see that man again, but the street was empty. Just her imagination, she thought. Maybe she had watched too many horror movies. The next day, she mentioned it to her neighbor, an older woman named Mrs. Hargrove, who had lived in the building for years. Mrs. Hargrove's face grew serious when Sarah told her about the tapping. "Oh dear," she said, "that tree is known for causing disturbances. People say it's haunted, and the man you saw is just part of the legend." Sarah laughed it off, thinking it was just a silly old wives' tale. But that night, as she lay in bed, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. The tapping started again, more relentless this time. She covered her ears, trying to block it out, but it wouldn't stop. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. Gathering her courage, she got out of bed and approached the window. She slowly pulled back the curtain, heart pounding. But once again, there was nothing outside, just the moonlight illuminating the empty street. Feeling foolish for being so spooked, she closed the curtains and went back to bed, trying to convince herself that it was all in her head. But the next night was worse. The tapping escalated into scratching, like fingernails dragging against the glass. This time, she was terrified. She decided to call a friend, hoping they would help calm her down. As she spoke, she noticed a shadow moving outside her window. It was that man again, standing beneath the tree, staring up at her. Her friend noticed her sudden silence and asked what was wrong. "There's someone outside," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. She turned the phone toward the window, but when she looked back, the man was gone. Just the empty street and the flickering streetlight. Her friend tried to reassure her, but Sarah was shaken. That night, she barely slept. When morning finally came, she decided to take matters into her own hands. She went to a local hardware store and bought heavier curtains, hoping they would block out whatever was causing her distress. The first night with the new curtains, she felt relieved and fell asleep easily. However, around 3 a.m., she was jolted awake again. This time, the scratching was accompanied by a low whisper. "Let me in," it said, faint and chilling. Sarah's heart raced. She turned on her bedside lamp, illuminating her room. Was she imagining things? Just as she started to convince herself it was a dream, the scratching returned, more frantic this time, as if something was desperate to get inside. Feeling cornered, she grabbed her phone and called 911, her hands shaking. "Someone is trying to get into my apartment," she whispered urgently. The operator assured her that they were sending someone over immediately. While she waited, the scratching stopped, replaced by an eerie silence that felt even more unsettling. She hugged her knees to her chest, staring at the door and willing the minutes to pass. When the police arrived, they searched the area and found nothing. They reassured her that she was safe, but suggested that she stay with a friend for the night. Shaken, she took their advice, packed a small bag, and left the apartment behind. The next day, she returned to her apartment with a friend to collect her things. The place felt different now, cold and foreboding. As they packed up her belongings, she glanced out the window one last time, and there he was, the man standing beneath the tree again, staring directly at her. But this time, time, something was different. He wasn't just watching, he was smiling. An unsettling grin stretched across his face. It sent chills down her spine. They hurried out of the apartment, and Sarah decided it was time to move. She couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was in that tree, and whatever that man represented, wasn't going to let her go easily. She found a new place, far from that apartment, and the haunting memories it held. To this day, she still wonders about the man in the window, and what would have happened if she hadn't left. So if you ever find yourself in a new place and something feels off, trust your instincts. You never know what might be lurking outside your window.